Greetings, one and all. Strategic Sage here, beginning a new series on the channel today. This is Distant Worlds Universe. And we're playing this, of course, because it was voted on as the viewer's choice selection by viewers of the channel back in April. So thanks to everybody for your patience as we have gotten this up and rolling. I hope it ends up being worth the wait for you. Now, this is going to be a tutorial-ish, introductory type of run. Distant Worlds is a huge game, can't show it all in one aspect, but I'm going to get into as many of the mechanics and how the game works as we can, and then if there's interest in a more challenge run down the future, we could consider that. I think that Distant Worlds is pretty much misunderstood to a large degree. In the space strategy broader genre, it's often compared to Stellaris and to Aurora, but I don't really think those are entirely accurate. It's a pretty unique blend with the 4X on the one side, but also a lot of simulation, heavy emphasis on player freedom. And I don't know any other game that combines them nearly the way that Distant Worlds does, for better or for worse. With all of the different options available, it's worth keeping in mind that the game is literally quite capable of playing itself if you want it to do that. Or you can just dive in and micromanage everything or anywhere in between. Now, you can see the options here. There's a bunch of different settings, but then there's advanced settings and empire settings. And there's also message settings. And there'll be more as we dive into actually playing. And I just wanted to show just sort of some of the scale of the different things that are available, not so much get into the specifics right away of all that those things do. So if we start off, the game has a few different eras. The Ancient Past is more of a scenario-driven type of thing. If you look in the description below, I can't show the intro cinematic for both technical but also copyright reasons in this video, but I'll have a link to a video of that in the description. The Ancient Galaxy is sort of what's covered in that cinematic. And at the end of that, all of the major empires in the galaxy have collapsed. There's a galactic crisis, and then you get into the Age of Shadows. And this is mostly dominated by pirates and the various empires and civilizations, spacefaring-wise, trying to struggle to rebuild. Then there's further storylines, etc., going into the classic era, which is normally what's recommended for early players. But there's a lot of debate on that, whether that's actually the right way, because you start out with a lot to do in the classic era. And we're actually going to be going into the Age of Shadows, which is essentially a pre-warp type of start, doing a standard type of empire. You can play as pirates as one of the other examples. We won't be doing that. But let's just take a look at, if we decided to, we won't be doing this. If we decide to customize fully our beginning, then we could take a look at this. And you can see there's all kinds of detail around the galaxy. You can even import a pre-existing map, etc. We've got colonization options and racial options. We'll be playing as the Akuro, as a pretty good starting race. And then you have details on your empire, and on other empires, and on victory conditions, etc., etc., etc. But if you do the choice that we're going to select, which is simply a standard empire, grab the Age of Shadows, then what you can have is simply a one-pager. So we're going to go with the irregular galaxy so that it's not a particularly good or bad start. There's not a lot of choke points in the galaxy. We're going to do with the default size, 700 stars, 10 by 10 sectors. You can see you can go as high as 1400, small as 100. So these galaxies can be huge or tiny, depending on what you want. And the Akuro, I think they've got a number of modest bonuses to them that should be good for a first-time run, but they're fairly baseline, and I wanted that as well. I didn't want a race that had extreme ups and downs to sort of skew the mechanics that we're going to be looking at. And then normal difficulty, and then monarchy is the most baseline government type as well. Now, it does take a few minutes to get this rolling, and I should mention that I am, for reasons of readability and viewability for the audience, I am playing on a much smaller resolution than you'll typically see with this. It is widescreen, but it's not as big as HD because everything stretches and the UI is old and it wasn't that great when it was created, to be perfectly honest. So what would happen is it'll be really blurry in a lot of areas and difficult to read. And it's still that way to a degree, but I can minimize that by holding down the resolution. So that's the reason there. we are greeted with this screen initially, giving us a bunch of information about the Akuros. We will deal with that later. We are to be known as the Akuro Commonwealth. That's our somewhat randomly generated empire name. And to begin with, we're just going to pause here and take stock of a few things, get our initial decisions that we need to have made going. So we are on Reese, a continental moon. So we have a home moon, not a home world. I always think that's kind of interesting. Let's see what planet's nearby. Well, there's some more moons here. Ah, there we go. Okay, so there's a bunch of moons. And then there is Kerbis 10, which is a gas giant that we're orbiting. And notice it says resource unknown on all of these. Even though they're right by us, the only planet or moon or whatever that we have good economic information on is actually where we're starting on Reese. So there's a lot of work for us to do, even in our home system. We're going to be focused here for quite a while in the early game in an Age of Shadows run. Now, we don't have any ground troops, and that's a bit of a problem. I want to be able to deal with any pirate raids that may eventuate, so I want to get a couple of those, and I can do it in a couple different ways. A good rule of thumb with Distant Worlds is, with the interface, when you find a way to do something, look for a better one. We can just do the right-click menu here, recruit troops, or we can go into the colony and see that one recruited this one, or I can recruit one in this way from that screen. Now we also need to talk about taxes here for a bit, because this is a area where there's a specific pro strat that's highly exploitative, and that is you just knock your taxes down to 0, and that will boost your population growth. There's sort of a sliding scale from about 20% down to 0% on your taxes. Lower it is, the higher your population growth is. And of course that would be very beneficial to you to just scale up not only your tax base, but also the higher your population is, the faster you construct things, the faster you do research, etc. So it really gives you a big advantage, and I'm going to go with a more conventional approach. Now we can see the morale indicator here, it's plus 12, and we've got sort of the neutral phase. If this goes negative, which it will do if you raise your taxes too high, you can have potentially unhappy citizens and then a revolt on your hands if you carry it on too long. The fastest way I know of to lose in the game is just jack your taxes way up at the beginning and wait, and you don't have to wait that long for them to throw you out of power. But what I'm going to do is try to keep this in the happy zone, which is plus 15 or 16 and up. So we're just going to lower our taxes, and again, I could do this from the colony screen. I'll just do it from here, because this way I can see the results right away. And okay, that's not quite enough. Probably one more should be. There we go. So I'm going to try to keep it in the happy zone. There's no big penalties for being in neutral zone versus happy. Just don't want to be negative here. But what I'm trying to do is just sort of balance a growth strategy versus a money-making strategy. It's just sort of a middle-of-the-road approach to get us going. Now, for the research, we have 3 categories: weapons, energy and construction, and high-tech and industrial. And you research one item in each category simultaneously. You want to make sure that there's always one item in each category set to go, because if there isn't, you'll just be wasting research effort. Now you can queue them up though to make that easier. I could select area weapons, for example, and then it would finish torpedo weapons, then move on to area weapons. I don't actually want either one of those for now though, so I'll right click to cancel. And notice on the energy torpedo weapons, it says 4% complete. That amount won't diminish or go away. I can come back to this at any time, it'll still be 4%, and I can lead off from there. So we're going to go down to armor plating, because as is, we have really no defensive systems that we can put on our ships or bases. If we were to come under hostile fire, then damage would immediately go to the internal components, and that would be very bad for us. We want more survivability, so we are going to get some armor plating to help out eventually with that. Energy construction, shields also very important for defense, but we're going to eliminate that as well. Much more important is our construction tech down here. Construction tech is always a big priority. If we look at the orbital assembly here, on the left side under where it says construction yard, our construction speed is 200 and our maximum ship size is 160. Now bigger ships are always better because of the way they work in Distant Worlds. And if I go to space construction, well, I can boost that ship size to 230, and the construction speed is also boosted by half up to 300. So that's a really big early leap that we're definitely going to want to make, and it's going to be vital, particularly at the beginning of the game, to get that first size boost in. Then high-tech and industrial. They want us to do transport systems, which is about moving our troops around from planet to planet. Well, I don't really want to do that. I'm not going to want to do that for quite a while. So we're going to get rid of that. A lot of people like to go with medical and entertainment systems to boot the happiness of the populace, but I'm going to focus on that a little bit later. I'm going to start with crew systems and storage systems, a couple of improved components for our ships. So that's our initial research setup. And next up, we're going to need a spaceport very, very badly. And the spaceport are they're vital to getting everything going. Most of the ship types you can build have to be built at a spaceport. If we want to get our economy going at all, we have to build one. So that's just a requirement. And that's going to make us do a deep dive into our first really key feature, which is the design screen. And this thing, it's a bear. Grab your hard hat. So we begin with this big, long, imposing list, and these are simply here because I have set in the automation settings, one of the few things I have on is for the game to generate designs for us. Not because I want to use these right now, but because I want to have something that we can compare our designs to. So if we switch over to the state bases, much shorter list, among them the spaceports, we could choose one of these and we could, edit it and use that as a baseline, but we're going to start from scratch here and just get to know how all of this works. Now, one thing I always do right away is to switch over to manually retrofitting. That way we're only updating our existing ships and bases when I want them to. And then for the roles, for most of the design types here, you can only retrofit to the same design type. In other words, you can only turn a gas mining ship into a gas mining ship, not into a freighter or a carrier into a frigate or anything like that. But with spaceports, that works a little bit differently. You can switch between the various spaceport options. So you can retrofit a small into a large, or a large into a medium, and so on. Now, what the role serves for design in the game is a couple of points. One, it defines what components the design needs. For example, you don't need to have labs. You need them on a research station, but you don't need to have labs on a troop transport. And then it also defines how the game will interact with that particular type of design. So in the case of spaceports, a large spaceport, which we're going to make, is going to be a big resource hub. Lots of resources will collect there. But a small spaceport is sort of like a frontier or backwater type of station. It's only going to bring minimal amounts of resources there, and medium will be in between that. So we'll grab the large spaceport. Don't need to worry about the weapons settings. Invading and fleeing is not an issue for a spaceport. And then we're going to take a look at some of our components here. We're going to make sure we always show all of them. Sort by name, sort by category. Okay, now we're going to take a look at our warnings up here. Everything in red has to be resolved. Right now, if I tried to, save this particular design, all warnings in red must be resolved. Okay. Then the yellow ones are optional to deal with. So let's take a look down our list of components. We will need a commerce center, and we can see the component guide. It'll give us more information on exactly what that does. It's going to take up this much size on the ship. It's going to cost that much to make. It's going to require this much energy. And it gives us a 5% trade bonus. That's like a tariff or a tax, if you will. Any trade conducted at a station that has a commerce center, we get a 5% cut. These are the resources required to manufacture it. And if we want to find out even more, it's not perfect, but it does have a lot of information in it. We can go to the Galactopedia, the help system. That'll pop up. It's a little bit slow to react sometimes, but it is there, and there's a lot of useful information in it. So as we add a commerce center to our design, that item disappears from here, and this list gets a little bit shorter. We're one step closer. Now the command center, we're going to want that as well. Higher levels of it will give us maintenance savings, but the lowest level one here, not really going to do much good other than it just being a required element. We need construction yards. That's where our ships will be built. So we're going to throw that on there. And then we can come down to, you can see these have been added, habitation modules and life support components. Now, these work a little bit differently. It's sort of an undocumented feature that each one you put on a station counts twice. If it's on a ship, it only counts once. And the way they work is you can see the support size here, meaning we'll have enough life support for this particular design to get up to a size of 60. But this is at the size of the life support and the HAB module, which works the same way, are actually subtracted out of that. So if we put these on here, if this was a ship design, one of each would get us up to 63, because 63 minus the 3 in size they take equals their 60 rating. But they work twice as well for stations as they do for ships, or each one of these counts as 2 on a station as compared to a ship. So this will actually get us up to 126, is how that works. Now it says our design must have a name. Let's take care of that. That's an easy thing to do. We're going to highly originally call this the Reese Spaceport. All right, now let's keep on moving. We don't have to have labs. We're only going for the minimal amount required here. We do need these plants. It's the same categories for the labs and for the manufacturing plants as we saw in the research screen: energy, high tech, and weapons. So we're going to add one of each of these. And we can see those items tick, tick, ticking off our list. Now we must have a reactor. There's only one kind that we can use here. And the space reactors, you can see it's going to use Caslon fuel. We've got the efficiency of it, all of that. And look at our display over here. It's got negative 14 energy output. That's a problem, because it means not everything on the design can run. We add the reactor, and all of a sudden that's positive. Green is good, red is bad. And then it's going to give us our overall efficiency for all of that, how much energy storage, the fuel that it uses, all of those fun things. But that also put us over the line. And this will happen gradually as you build out bigger. Be like, oh, we need more HAB and life. So that's going to be thrown on there. We need a fuel storage cell. Okay, we'll put on one of those. We need a docking bay, one of those. And this is the smallest then functional spaceport that we're capable of making at this time. We can see it would cost $875 to purchase and $323 annually to maintain. And then we have all of these yellow warnings. We don't have a supply of the required resources. Well, that actually doesn't matter right now, because you start off the game with a pretty good stockpile. But it is worth noting that we'll need to get to that later on and make sure we don't run out long term. And also, if we're not doing a good job with that, if the price of some commodity is going up, then our maintenance costs could go up as well. So that maintenance cost it's a little fungible. We could add lab components. We're not going to for this iteration, but we will be doing that eventually. You can add shields, which we haven't researched yet. Armor, we haven't researched yet. Energy collector components, we haven't researched yet. Drawing a pattern here. Now let's take a little closer look at a couple of these components that's worth looking at. The weapons, high-tech energy plants, the manufacturing components themselves, there is either a major gameplay change that was added and wasn't documented, or more likely there's a bug here, because they're only supposed to be able to support effectively a certain amount of construction yards. But from what testing people have done, the latest figures that I have seen on it, they can support anywhere from 30 to 50 or 60 construction yards each, which is not at all the way it was supposed to be. And the game designs will only put a handful of construction yards for every set of the 3 type of plants that they have. And so I'm just sort of going to house rule it here so I'm not being too exploitative. Basically, the way I like to do it is, these are 20,000 capacity currently, so I can have 1 construction yard for every 5,000 capacity. That's just a number I plucked out of the middle of thin air. But we'll increase the abilities of our plants over time and be able to increase that ratio. For now, I'm going to throw in 4 construction yards, because 4 times 5,000 would be 20,000. Then cargo space. You do not need cargo space on your spaceports, because they can use the cargo space of the planet, which is infinite. But again, the game designs will put some small amounts of that on there, and I'm going to fix that as well. So I will put on a couple of cargo bays, and I'll also add a few more docking bays. So that means 4 ships can dock here at a time and refuel or repair, whatever they have to do. And then also the 4 construction yards, 4 ships can be built in parallel. So if I were to queue up, say, 6, then those last 2 would have to wait until a couple of the first group were built and there was a free spot for them. So this is what we're going to go with for our initial spaceport, just to get things rolling. And we can now save this design. It is, you see, 1317 and 469 is our cost. And now we can compare it to some of the others. Now look at their large spaceport. Look at that thing, but also look at their small spaceport. Like, even that, I mean, it's 3 times plus the cost of ours. So let's see what they have. Now see, they've got 6 cargo bays. They only went with 3 construction yards, but 6 dock bays, and they've got labs on here. They've got a whole bunch of fuel cells. And why would we have a whole bunch of fuel cells on a base? I'm not sure. And then they've also got a bunch of weapons. Now, I'm not putting weapons on mine for the simple reason that needs to be a bunch more reactors to power the weapons and all of that. But I'm not putting weapons on mine because we would have no chance of defeating any enemy at this point. I mean, we don't even have armor shields yet. So I think that's just a waste. Right now we would simply have to negotiate with any enemies that we would run into. So now that this is done, we want to build one. And again, we could do the right-click method, and we can build various things here. Or, the way I prefer to do it, well, we can actually also go into this, the build order screen, and we can queue up various items in here, and they will build them wherever, anywhere in your particular empire. I'm going to go to the construction yard screen. Now, the planet Reese is the only place we have that can build anything. So, that's what we're going to go with. But notice it can only build here stations and spaceports and then the construction ship. There's nothing else, like all of the military ship designs and everything else that they saw aren't available here because you can't build them at a planet. You need a spaceport with a construction yard in order to do them. So, we're going to build our spaceport here. And believe it or not, it is time for us to actually unpause the game. So as we move on, then we can see everything is gradually moving around. And we start to hear signs of activity. And if we select this here, we'll see these little bits of effects. And then you can start to see bits of it come into view. Now you can actually change the components they're building. Notice most of it's unbuilt, but it still physically exists. And it can be attacked in this state. And you can change the order that you list the components in the design from top to bottom will affect which ones come online first. So if you intelligently put them in the right order, for example, you could have the construction yards come online like halfway through the process. And so you could start building things from the spaceport before the spaceport is even finished. So that can be all kinds of fun. But in my case, I'm not worried about min-maxing to that degree, but it's important to know that's out there. Okay, here we go. So we have constructed a spaceport. Serves as a shipyard. We can build many different types of starships. It's galvanized the resolve of our population. Give us a short-term boost to our economy. And it also becomes a hub for trade and commerce. Freighters will deliver there. Ships can refuel there. We should upgrade with more capabilities, etc. So in other words, this is really cool. And we have a spaceport. And we need to do something with it. So what are we going to do with it? Well, we have more designs to make because there are now many more things that we need to do and we need to get some ships rolling. And we will be doing exactly that when we come back for the next episode. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoy this exploration of Distant Worlds, and there is much fun yet to be had. Stay tuned.